Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, one of the biggest stories there is, ancient Rome. A civilization that really did shape so much of the world we know.
It really did, and it's fascinating because it's not just battles and emperors, it's, a huge story about how political systems evolve. We're looking at how Rome went from this mythical founding through that whole Republic experiment right up to being this massive marble empire.
Yeah, our goal here is to dig into those key moments, the famous names, sure, but also the system changes. How did this place, supposedly started by twins, raised by a wolf, end up ruling the known world? There's so much ambition, so much drama there.
And that foundation myth, Romulus and Remus, it's the perfect place to start, actually. These abandoned twins found by a she-wolf, it sets a certain tone.
It really does. It's so primal, isn't it? This incredibly organized empire, starting with, fratricide, Romulus killing Remus.
It's symbolic, right? It tells you Rome was born from struggle, from conflict, right from day one. Ambition and violence were baked in, you could say, quite literally.
And after Romulus, you had this period of kings, 7 of them, building things up, setting traditions. But the Romans, they got wary of kings, didn't they? Too much power in one person's hands?
Exactly. That suspicion boiled over with the last king, Tarquin the Proud. His rule became intolerable for many, so around 509 BC, they kicked him out.
And instead of just getting a new king, they did something pretty radical.
Totally radical for the time. They created the Republic.
Okay, so the Republic, it wasn't just no more kings. They built a whole system to stop anyone else becoming king-like, right? How did that actually work?
Well, the core idea was checks and balances. Structured paranoia, as you put it before we started recording, is a great term. They had 2 consuls.
2 leaders, not one.
Right. Elected every year, sharing power equally. And the key thing, they both had to agree on major decisions. One could veto the other.
Ah, so built-in gridlock almost.
Right.
To prevent rash decisions or power grabs.
Precisely. It was designed against tyranny more than for efficiency, maybe.
Right.
And then you had the Senate guiding them.
Made up of the wealthy, experienced guys. But what about the average person, the plebeians? Do they have any say if the rich guys were in the Senate?
Well, that was the big struggle of the early Republic. The plebeians fought for decades to get more power and rights. Their biggest win, arguably, was the 12 Tables.
Laws written down.
Yes, carved into bronze tablets, put up in public for everyone to see.
Why was that such a big deal? Seems obvious to us now.
Because before that, judges, often wealthy patricians, could kind of interpret unwritten laws however they wanted. Secretly,
Right, tilted in favor of the powerful.
Exactly. Putting the laws out in the open meant everyone knew the rules. It gave common people actual legal ground to stand on. Huge for transparency and fairness.
Okay, so this system, this balance, it created the framework for what they saw as the ideal leader. And that brings us to Cincinnatus.
Cincinnatus. The ultimate Roman hero in the Republic's eyes. Just a regular farmer.
Called away from his plow, wasn't he?
Yeah, Rome's in crisis, facing invasion. The Senate says we need a dictator, which meant temporary absolute power back then. They pick Cincinnatus.
And the story goes, he sorts it all out incredibly fast. Was it 16 days?
It's just 16 days. Defeats the enemy, sorts out the crisis, total control, ruthless efficiency. But here's the kicker.
He gives the power back.
Immediately, no victory tour, no demands. He just resigns the dictatorship and goes straight back to his farm.
Wow. Walking away from absolute power, that was the gold standard for them.
That was virtue, selfless service to the state, not personal glory.
But ideals are hard to maintain, especially when you start expanding.
Yeah.
Rome got ambitious, clashed with neighbors like the Etruscans, the Samnites.
And eventually the big one, Carthage, the powerhouse across the Mediterranean.
The Punic Wars. This feels like a real turning point. Rome versus Carthage.
It was the crucible, yeah. Determined, disciplined Rome against this wealthy naval power. And the Second Punic War threw up one of history's most legendary generals, Hannibal Barca.
Right, Hannibal. The guy who didn't just fight Rome at sea or on the fringes. He did something audacious.
Audacious is putting it mildly. His invasion plan was, frankly, insane. Marching his army, including war elephants, remember, all the way from Spain.
Across the Pyrenees.
Through southern France and then over the Alps. The freezing, treacherous Alps in winter.
Just getting there was a feat. The goal was pure shock and awe.
Yeah.
Taking the fight to Rome's backyard.
Exactly, and it worked. For years, he ran rings around the Romans in Italy, inflicted defeat after defeat. The worst being the Battle of Cannae.
Cannae, that's the really famous one. What happened there?
Hannibal, outnumbered almost 2-1, used brilliant tactics to completely encircle and annihilate a massive Roman army. Just devastating. It looked like Rome might actually be finished.
But they weren't. This is the key thing about Rome, isn't it? The resilience.
Unbelievable resilience. They lost tens of thousands of men at Cannae, maybe more. But they refused to negotiate. They refused to surrender. They were just too stubborn.
So what did? They couldn't beat Hannibal head on.
They adapted. They started avoiding big battles with him, focused on harassing his supply lines, wearing him down. It was a war of attrition. And then finally, they took the fight back to Carthage itself.
Under Scipio Africanus.
Right. Scipio forced Hannibal to leave Italy to defend his home city. And eventually, Rome won. Discipline and sheer bloody-mindedness overcame Hannibal's genius.
So Rome wins the Punic Wars, becomes the dominant power, external threats dealt with. But the sources really hammer this point. Winning those wars basically broke their republic from the inside. How did that happen?
It's this deep irony, isn't it? All that conquest brought unimaginable wealth back to Italy, but it also brought huge numbers of enslaved people.
Okay.
So the rich senators and landowners bought up vast tracts of land, often land left ruined by the wars or abandoned by soldiers, and worked it with this cheap slave labor. They got incredibly wealthy.
That the average Roman citizen, the guy fighting those wars.
Exactly. He comes home after years away, finds his small family farm can't compete with these massive slave-run estates, or maybe it's just gone bankrupt.
So they lose their land, drift to the cities.
Become impoverished, unemployed, and deeply resentful. This huge gap opens up between the super-rich elite and the struggling masses. That created the political chaos the Republic couldn't handle.
And into that chaos step the strongmen, the ambitious types. This leads us to the first triumvirate.
Yeah, Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. They weren't elected officials working together in the traditional sense. It was more like an informal pact, using their personal power, their armies, their money.
To basically bypass the Senate and run things themselves.
They bent the Republic to their will, as the sources say. It wasn't reform, it was control.
But alliances like that, built on ambition, they rarely last, do they?
No. Eventually, it came down to Caesar versus Pompey. The rivalry intensified, and Rome itself became the prize in their personal power struggle. It all culminated in one moment, at one small river.
Rubicon.
Crossing the Rubicon. Caesar leading his loyal army out of his assigned province into Italy proper. It was illegal. It was treason.
An act of war against the state.
Absolutely. It was the point of no return. Declaring civil war, essentially saying his ambition mattered more than the Republic's laws.
And he won. Marched on Rome, defeated Pompey's forces. The Republic was effectively over, even if the institution still sort of existed on paper.
Pretty much. And look at Caesar now. He becomes dictator, not temporary like Cincinnatus. He gets himself declared dictator for life.
So the opposite of the Cincinnatus ideal.
Completely. He did bring some stability, reform laws, even the calendar we still basically use, but he was acting less like a servant of Rome and more like a king, as one source puts it.
Which triggered that old Roman fear of monarchy again.
Exactly, and it led directly to his assassination. The Ides of March, 44 BC, stabbed to death right there in the Senate building.
By men he thought were his allies. Brutus.
Yeah, the famous, maybe legendary last words, Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus. It highlights the betrayal. These weren't enemies. They were his peers, maybe even friends who thought they were saving the Republic.
But they didn't save it, did they? His death just caused more chaos.
Total chaos. It shattered whatever fragile balance was left. It paved the way, after more civil war, for the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire.
Right. Stability finally comes, but under a different system entirely. Under Augustus, the first official emperor. And this is when Rome really hits its stride, visually at least.
Oh yeah. The imperial era, especially the early part, the Pax Romana, that's when you get the Rome we often picture. Gleaming marble temples, paved roads stretching everywhere, those incredible aqueducts.
Engineering marvels bringing fresh water into the city.
Clean water, public sanitation on a massive scale. Rome became this magnificent, powerful center of the world. It must have been awe-inspiring.
What was daily life like in this imperial capital? Bustling, I imagine.
Incredibly vibrant. Noisy, crowded, definitely. Markets everywhere, selling goods from all over the empire. Olives, wine, grain, exotic spices, pottery, textiles.
A hub of commerce.
And you mentioned the baths earlier. They were more than just places to get clean. Oh, much more. The massive public bath complexes were central to Roman social life. Yes, you went to get clean, but also to exercise, meet friends, do business deals, hear the news, gossip.
So like a community center gym and maybe even a bit of an unofficial news exchange all rolled into one.
Pretty much. Senators, merchants, soldiers, maybe even poets, though, probably in different sections or at different times they'd all be there. You could feel the pulse of the city in the baths.
And then there was the other big public space, the Colosseum. Sheer spectacle.
Unbelievable scale, holding, what, over 50,000 people? Maybe more? All gathered for entertainment.
Entertainment that was often brutal, though.
Gladiators.
Gladiators fighting each other or wild animals. They even flooded the arena sometimes for mock naval battles. It was violent, yes, but it was also a way for the emperors to connect with the masses, provide bread and services.
Keep the population happy, or at least distracted. It's interesting, that impulse for mass spectacle. Thousands gathering in a stadium. We still do that, don't we? For sports, concerts. Absolutely. The technology is different, the specific events are different, but that human need for a collective experience, for that thrill of the crowd, that seems pretty timeless. Rome understood that and used it.
But even at its height, with all the marble and aqueducts and legions, the empire wasn't invincible. The sources hint at its fragility.
Yeah, definitely. Behind the scenes, there was always corruption, political infighting in the Senate, ambitious generals out in the provinces with loyal armies. It was a constant balancing act.
It required incredibly strong, capable leadership at the top, almost constantly.
Pretty much. And as the source material wisely notes, like all things built by humans, it carried the seeds of decay. Human failings, greed, ambition, incompetence, betrayal, these things could always undermine the system. As Caesar's story showed, even the most powerful structures rely on flawed people.
So looking back at this whole sweep, from Romulus and Remus, the Wolf twins, through the Republic's experiment with balance and law, Hannibal's challenge, the internal collapse, Caesar, then Augustus and the empire's glory and eventual fragility. What's the big takeaway?
I think it shows that Rome's success came from a mix of things. Raw ambition, yes, but also incredible discipline, adaptability, and crucially, those moments where they tried to create systems, like the Republic, like the 12 Tables, to manage power and ensure some fairness.
But those systems were vulnerable.
Always vulnerable to human nature. When ambition and greed outweigh